Time for more of the 3D printer build. Welcome to Hack a Week. So we're back in the Hack Shack this week. Last week we covered, let's see, the Y-axis. This week we are going to make the Z-axis frame and the X-axis carrier assembly. Let's get started. So first up, we've got the side plate here that the Z-axis stuff is going to mount to. And we need to put some of the channels on there. We need to mount those up with some M5x8 screws and nuts, and I've got them already rigged up here, 4 of each, and we're going to put them through the holes on the sides here. Some holes here, then the bolts go on this side and the nuts go on this side. So we're going to install 4 of these. Now we're going to join this long edge to a 295 millimeter long frame piece. We'll drop the nuts into the slot. I'll take my Allen, whoa, get back here, unruly tools, we'll give those a spin and get them snugged up just a little bit. Want it flush with the bottom here. Just going to take them to snug for now, and then we're going to mount that onto the lower frame here, onto the lower Y-axis. Now according to the drawings here, it says to measure back about 165 millimeters. So I'm going to go back, let's see, there's 110, 20, 30, 40, 50, 65, and it's an approximate, so put a little scratch mark there. Now that 165 millimeter point will be right here at the edge of this piece of frame, right there. So let's drop the nuts down in there. I actually need to mark that on the outside edge so I can see where the heck it's at. Right there. Let's move this to the 165 millimeter mark. And we'll snug down those bolts. Give you a look from the back side here, you can see how it mounted up. 165 millimeters from the end to this edge of this frame. Now we're going to mount this 410 millimeter long frame onto the top of this piece. And let's see, the instructions say that from this edge to this edge here should be about 51 millimeters. So I'm going to mark that on my piece right here, put a little scribe mark on it, 51 millimeters. I like how they say about 51 millimeters. That sounds pretty precise to me, not so much an about thing. Now we're going to join that with another one of these corner pieces, just like we did on the bottom on the Y-axis. So we need a couple of, let's see, the M5 by 8 millimeter bolts and some of the M5 nuts. Need 2 of each. I'm going to mount the right angle piece to that top frame piece first. So I've got a bolt and nut assembly together here. I'm going to drop that down in there and line it up on my 51 millimeter mark, and we'll snug that up. Now we'll put it up here on the top of this piece, and then we're going to load the nut in from the side. Snug that up. Now this one right here, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down pretty good. We're going to take the other 295 millimeter long piece. We're going to put that in right here. We're going to join that up with another one of these right angle pieces. this piece first and just mount it up flush with the end. Now we'll take another nut and bolt assembly, poke it through that, put it up into here, get it lined up with the base down here, and we're going to snug that one up just barely tight. Now I'm going to check this with a square and a triangle here. See just how squared up we are. Still got to go over just a little bit. Alright, let's give it a good snug right there for now. Now this should measure 51 millimeters from here to here. Let me get my calipers in here and see what we've got. Now it's a little more than 51, it's actually 55. Go back and check the other side real quick. Now that one measures about 48. Strange. What really matters is the squareness on here. So for now we're just going to leave this alone. Now we can mount up the other panel on this side with more of these 3mm bolts with the nut. So let's get a couple of these started here. Got 4 bolts and nuts started in this frame. And now we'll mount these onto the whole framework. We got those lined up. Let's get these other ones lined up in the slot. Going to tighten them up into the vertical one first here. I'm just going for snug right now, not totally tight. We should be 165 millimeters from this end to this edge of this frame. Make sure the caliper is zeroed. And make sure this will, oh no, it only goes to 150, so I'll get out my trusty little ruler here, tape measure, 165. Now let's see where we're at with this one. This one is at about 163. So, need to loosen these a little. I'm going to move it this way a bit. Till we are right at 165 millimeters, which is right there. We'll make sure that this is parallel on the outside with the frame. Give it a little bit of a preliminary tighten. Check it again. Very important that all these things stay nice and even and parallel so that you don't get any binding. Now we'll snug these down just a little more so I can get out my carpenter's square again and see where I'm at with this. Comparing it right here to the guide rods, it needs to come this way a little bit. I'm going to loosen it here because I was a little long on that section that was poking out there. Check it for square again. So we're just going to work our way through this whole process of tweaking things until we get it all nice and square. Looks like I got it. Do one last measurement across here. See where we're at. 308 millimeters, and up here we are at, it's about 309. I'm off by just one little millimeter. I'm gonna figure out which way. Well, let's see. I think think I'll move this side in just a little bit. I'm going to give myself a little mark. There's my 1mm. .308. All right, now I can tighten everything up. Now we have two stepper motor mounts to put on, and this is the orientation they'll go. They'll get a M3 by 8mm bolt there, and one there, and then they'll mount to the frame. Now each one is going to mount in the same location, just mirror imaged of each other, and that would be right here. Just like that, butted up against this, and you want to use this edge as a nice reference for your alignment. Keep it nice and parallel to the frame. And we'll repeat the same thing for the other side, just flipped over the other way. Motor mounts installed. Now we're going to mount the motors, the steppers. These are the ones that are 34mm thick. And they'll mount with the wire connector facing toward the back of the machine. And they mount up with some M3 by 5 screws. And we'll give those a final tighten down. One more to mount on the other side. Motors mounted. Now we have the couplings to mount on here. They're kind of a flexible coupling. One end has a small hole, the other end has a large hole. We're going to put the small end on the motor, and we want to space it up from the motor here about 10mm. I found a nut that I just had laying in my drawer of parts that's about 10mm thick. I'm going to use that as a guide. So I can just drop this down there and then tighten up the set screws. There we go. See how that's a little bit flexible? That's the idea behind that coupling. It needs to be a little flexible. Now we'll put one on the other motor. So we've got the Y-axis going. We have the Z-axis framework set up. Now we need to put together the X-axis. So we have here one of the main mounts for the X-axis that's going to carry everything up and down. This is a brass piece that goes in here, and it's kind of the nut for the lead screw. So this is the lead screw. This will attach here. As the lead screw moves on the stepper motor, it will move the X-axis up and down. So we need to put this nut in place. It is held in place with 4 M3 by 16mm long screws with M3 nuts on them. So we'll mount those up now. So the nut is in place right there, and then the bolts go through from the bottom up. But you'll find that they won't just push right through in the 3D printed part. They're a little tight, so they need to be actually threaded in. All the screws are through, and we will put the nuts on now. So we'll hold the nut with some pliers, or a tiny wrench if you have one, and tighten these up. Work your way around in a cross pattern. Go over to this one now and tighten that one up. Try to tighten them down evenly. A really small nut driver might work, but the problem is you can't get it onto the nut because of that center flange, so just have to improvise with pliers or a very tiny wrench. Okay, that looks pretty good. They're all poking through about the same distance. Now we need to put a limit switch on here, one of these little micro switches, just like the other one we installed. Let's see, it's going to go on this side with the little tab pointing up towards that brass nut that we just installed, and it gets held in place with two 2mm by 16mm long screws, the little teeny tiny ones. And we'll put 2 nuts on the back of that. Don't go too tight, because you might crack the switch. There we go. Micro switch installed. Here's another assembly that will work with the X-axis. Same kind of setup. We've got a nut here for a lead screw that goes in. Same thing there that we had before. The M3 by 20 bolts will go through there with some nuts. And then there is also a bearing right in here. And they mention in the instructions to make sure that that nut and bolt doesn't get tightened too much, and to make sure that these bearings in here spin freely, which is a little tricky to see. Right now they don't look like they're spinning very freely at all, so I'm going to loosen this up a little bit. Oh, it's actually pretty loose already. I think this would be a good place for some more of the Loctite stuff, just like I did on the other bearing. Put just a little bit of the red Loctite on there. Put the nut back on. And then we'll just barely tighten it. Just a minimal amount of torque kind of thing. Because this is, I believe this is going to have a belt running around it. Okay. Now this assembly gets one of the nuts for the lead screw in it, same as before, with the M3 by 16 screw comes through from the bottom and out the top with the nut on it, just like the other one. And we'll tighten these bolts and nuts down, same as the other one. Now we will assemble this whole mess with some of the polished rods here. What are these? These are the 410mm polished rods. They're going to insert into that hole in the back of that piece. Should fit in there pretty darn snug. I believe we got to push those in as far as they're going to want to go. To go almost to the other end there, so there we go. Okay, now we're going to put some of the box bearings on, the linear bearing. Let's see, got to get my orientation right here. Drop 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, 1 on the bottom, like so. Then this piece goes on. Both of these with the nut for the lead screw pointing up. Tip that up and push those down until they bottom out. Like so. Okay, takes care of that. So this is what you should have when you're all done. Got that piece on that end. Got a limit switch mounted right there. It goes over to 2 bearings on top, 1 on the bottom, and then the other piece over here. Both with the brass nut pointing up. So made some pretty good progress this week. We have the Z-axis frame built, got the X-axis carrier built. That's going to go on next time. It will move up and down here for the Z-axis, back and forth for the Y, and we'll probably get the print head mounted. And then in the next video, we'll move on to the electronics and all that jazz. So that's about it for today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for the donations, and be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Till next time. Same thing with this piece that's going to go on the other end. And press on. Oops. Got ahead of myself.